I do. I believe that all of Trump's nominees will be confirmed. Pete was acting as a heat shield. He was taking all of that heat for all these nominees, and that helped people like Tulsi and Kash and RFK Jr. I believe all of these nominees will be confirmed because President Trump has a mandate. His historic election victory, he delivered every single swing state. The American people sent a very strong message. They support him. And what we saw after the election was that with the Article 3 project, these nominees are very popular. We had that historic month in December. It aligned with public opinion polling, saying that not only is Trump's transition popular, but so are his nominees. So I do believe that there will be some tough hearings. There'll be some tough lines of questioning, but the Republicans in the Senate understand the mandate that President Trump was given.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Good morning, everyone. It is so great to be with you today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get to it. If you are catching us after right now, if you're catching us a little bit later, we want you to know that we are now live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and X. You can search for TSOF Podcast on Rumble. I don't think the State of Freedom brings up the right, it doesn't bring us up, I don't think. Anyway, subscribe to us and get the notifications if you want to be able to catch us live. Right now, we are streaming Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Central Time. Okay, now to focus on today, we have a friend of the show back with us. Mark Lucas from the Article 3 Project is here, and he will be giving his firsthand account of how Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing went. We all saw a lot of clips, and there were some cringe moments. There were some fantastic knock it out of the park moments. And Mark will also be outlining what other fights the Article 3 Project is taking on in the weeks ahead to get the Trump appointees across the finish line. Before we get into that, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Ephesians chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, and it says, "All because of the cascading riches of his grace. This superabundant grace is already powerfully working in us, releasing within us all forms of wisdom and practical understanding." And isn't that exactly what we need in this time? All forms of wisdom and practical understanding. The Lord has called each of us to serve him, to serve his purposes, and to serve his people in various ways. And we all individually, no matter the field of service and no matter the call in our lives, need all forms of wisdom and practical understanding. This impartation from Holy Spirit, along with the powerful weapon of prayer, will be how we take back the territory the enemy has stolen, and it will be how we see victory after victory after victory. We can't do it on our own, and I think most of us know that by now, but let's make this our prayer today. Lord, make each of us aware of your super abundant grace. Help us to recognize and utilize every form of wisdom and practical understanding that you release to us for every circumstance, challenge, and decision we face.
Everything that we do should be grounded in his grace, in his love, and in his wisdom. And we should seek him first in the morning in Lamentations, knowing that his graces do come forth fresh each morning. No question about that. And I know, Danielle, that our guest today, not Pete Hegseth, but a very close friend of Pete Hegseth, Mark Lucas from Article 3 is with us. Mark, thank you for joining us. We know that you have been present at the Pete Hegseth Senate hearings. What is your sense of what's going on there? We know there was some fireworks in there, but from our vantage point, it looks like Mr. Hegseth has been handling himself quite well. What are your thoughts?
Pete Hegseth will be the next Secretary of Defense. He did an incredible job at that Senate confirmation hearing, and it was really neat to see him walk in to the room, and the whole room erupted into chants of USA, USA. I was seated with Pete's family and some people he served with, and some of his closest friends. And behind us, the room was filled with veterans, whether it was the Navy SEALs had marched into DC or people that served with Pete. It was like a home game. Senate Republicans have the majority. So Chairman Wicker was presiding over the hearing. He had the gavel to bring people kind of to attention to say, hey guys, we can't be cheering during this hearing. But it really set the tone that Pete had the momentum. Coming into that hearing, initially, when Pete was announced, people said that his confirmation was dead on arrival. But the Article 3 project, we quickly went to work and we were able to connect people to Senate offices. Almost 25,000 messages were lobbed in just for Pete Hegseth alone.
Wow.
And it really changed the dynamic for his confirmation proceeding. So he was going in there with momentum and the environment was just electric.
Absolutely. And it looked as though there was nothing that he was asked that he did not handle both sincerely and very deftly. In fact, I thought that he made some of the particularly Democrat senators who were trying to embarrass him look really, really very bad. One was Senator Elizabeth Warren, who was a picture of hostility toward Pete. And I just found it so interesting that this is a lady who lied about her own ethnic origin, who has certainly not been a model of integrity in her own life. Does any of the hostility, Mark, that's been coming from the Democrats toward Pete surprise you?
It doesn't. I anticipated they were going to try to run the same playbook they did against Brett Kavanaugh with anonymous and just personal smears. And the confirmation hearing started with Pete's opening statement, which was interrupted several times by these Code Pink protesters. You would think that the Democrats would learn and tell these guys to stay out of these hearings because it really doesn't make the Democrats look good. It was disruptive, but Pete was laser focused. It didn't seem to bother him. And I was surprised by the Democrats' lack of preparation. I felt that their line of questioning was unsophisticated. It wasn't really well coordinated. And we were all waiting for that shoe to drop. What type of curveball were Democrats going to present? And I was waiting for Elizabeth Warren to really bring the heat. And her line of questioning just didn't land. And you could feel it in the room that people felt uncomfortable with some of this questioning. It felt very unprofessional, very personal in nature. And the Democrats did not walk away looking good from that hearing. In contrast, Pete was very just well disciplined. He stayed on script. He was focused. He talked about the policy and he never engaged in a personal back and forth when he really could have.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Mark, let me ask this before Danielle follows up on that. When your question is focused incessantly on whether or not women in general belong in close quarter heated combat, that is not a controversial issue for the vast majority of Americans who are sensible and logical and understand the psychological and physical differences between men and women, particularly if they're in that type of environment. The idea that she chose to double and triple down on that, I thought was just a horrible decision. She's not going to gain much ground with the American people, and I would suspect with the broad base of the U.S. Senate, if that is her sort of her Rosetta Stone of trying to embarrass him. What are your thoughts on that?
Pete's position on women in combat is very much a mainstream position. People believe that women can serve in combat if they live up to the same demanding physical standards as men, because really it shouldn't be about male or female. And Pete made this point over and over again. It was about maintaining standards. And we have seen that the Department of Defense has lowered the standards for the physical fitness tests in the Army Ranger School. They continue to reduce standards to try to meet a social quota, when really the American people and myself who served in combat, we just want to be able to have people that can serve in combat, that can endure those vigorous rigors that combat entails. And so Pete did a really good job. They kept on doubling down, trying to make it sound like he was an extremist. But the position that Pete takes is a very mainstream position.
There were some really fantastic moments in the hearing, and one of my favorite lines of questioning was by Senator Sheehy. So he started out by, this is just by memory of what I remember the exchange, so forgive me. But basically, he asked Pete, how many genders are there? And Pete says there's two, obviously without any hesitation. And then Senator Sheehy says, I should know, I'm a Sheehy, which was hysterical, absolutely hysterical. And then he continued to go on and say, well, how many push-ups can you do? And Pete said that he did 5 sets of 47 push-ups that morning. And I just love the humor in that. And I love that he's laser focused on mission, obviously. And then he went on to ask, Senator Sheehy went on to ask him a lot of questions about the mechanics of different types of weaponry and the clip size and the caliber size. And he just knew all of the answers to the questions because he's familiar with the weapons. He is a warfighter. And I just thought that was such a stroke of brilliance on the part of Senator Sheehy to bring out the fact that this guy actually has been at war. He understands the material and he understands the people. And I thought that was beautifully done. Do you think there's any hope that there are any Democrats who will vote for him?
I do. I think there's an opportunity with how well Pete performed that some of these Democrats, like Fetterman in the state of Pennsylvania, that voted for Trump, that he could vote for Pete Hegseth. You saw that, and to go back to
That's
your
true.
to your question about Sheehy, I was sitting with a bunch of warfighters behind Pete, a bunch of infantry soldiers and officers, and we loved that line of questioning. We knew the calibers of the ammunition he was talking about. We knew about the weapon systems, and it really proved a good point that Pete Hegseth is a warfighter first. He didn't attain the rank of general. He never worked inside the military industrial complex. Pete's number one priority is returning our military to the fundamentals, which is serving the men and women in uniform, really putting them first. And it's an incredible contrast to what we have with the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who abandoned those 13 service members who were killed at Abbey Gate during that botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. He's going to make an incredible Secretary of Defense because he cares about what's most important, and that is the warfighter.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the mainstream media, Mark, after the hearing, had no choice but to say that he had knocked it out of the park. I mean, there was no question. And I looked at the betting markets after, and they said that his chances of getting confirmed went up 10%. And so the betting markets, after his confirmation hearing, called his chances of getting confirmed, I think 80. I think that's a pretty good chance.
I couldn't wait for the hearing yesterday. I've known Pete Hegseth for over a decade. He does not fear big moments. Those bright lights and tough questions don't intimidate him. Pete Hegseth was built for that moment. And it was incredible to sit there behind him and just watch how deftly he answered all of those questions. He really displayed his academic pedigree. He went to Princeton, he went to Harvard. He's been on 3 different deployments. He went to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo Bay. He was a man that was built for that moment. And I was so excited. The veterans in the room were excited. I heard just the response from the grassroots army all across the country that they are so excited for Pete Hegseth to become our SecDef.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Absolutely. I feel very excited about him, and I think he's exactly what we need. Mark, what about other nominees, other focuses of the Article 3 project? I know we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we've got Kash, Patel. What other nominees is Article 3 focused on in order to try to make sure that they get through?
The Article 3 project was focused primarily on Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth early on after the election, just because the conventional wisdom in Washington was saying they were dead on arrival. So we had close to 1,000 messages lobbed into U.S. Senate offices telling those members that the American people support President Trump, they support him as a disruptor, and they want his cabinet to be disruptors just like him. And that's why
Yeah.
Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth, those nominations contributed to the Article 3 project having one of our most historic months of activity in the month of December. When a lot of people are focused on the holidays, it was a record month for us. Now we're transitioning to Kash Patel, to RFK Jr., to Tulsi Gabbard, and today, U.S. Attorney candidate Pam Bondi. We believe that she will make an incredible Attorney General due to her record in the state of Florida, her loyalty to Trump, but more importantly, her loyalty to the United States Constitution and to the rule of law.
She's incredible. I watched some clips of her hearing yesterday, and first of all, she has nerves of steel. That woman was not rattled by any of these. I'm just not going to say all the words that I would like to say to describe the people who did such a horrible job of they just proved themselves, right? I mean, Adam Schiff sitting there and talking about how she's going to be a tool for Trump to go after his political enemies. Hello, come on, Adam Schiff, look at the world around you. And then I can't remember who the senator was, but one senator just got really wrapped around the axle about Kash Patel and how terrified he was of Kash Patel. And I was like, you folks are just showing all your cards. You are so dumb. Of course, Kash Patel's going to come in and go after you because you are a criminal. But that's not because it's retribution. It's because you're a criminal. Anyway, that's my personal take. Who do you think, Mark, is going to be some of the toughest ones to get across the line? We know there's been a campaign to malign Tulsi Gabbard. There's been a huge campaign for years, long before now, to malign the views of RFK Jr. Because he's standing up against Big Pharma. And then Kash just doesn't care what these people think. He is just his own man. So those may be some of the tougher ones, but what's your take?
Pete Hegseth was supposed to be the toughest confirmation.
Wow.
And due to his performance, we believe that he'll be swiftly confirmed. My home state senator, Joni Ernst, who early on showed reservations, after the hearing, she expressed her support for Pete Hegseth. She went on my good friend Simon Conway's radio show in Des Moines, Iowa that evening and said that she is a yes vote for Pete Hegseth.
And Mark, I want to plug you because she read an excerpt of your letter to her encouraging her support of Pete in the hearing. She entered it into the official record as well. And so it was great to hear your name carried by her. And
No doubt.
It's clear
No
that
doubt
she
about
has
it.
a lot of respect for you as well.
It was nice for Joni to read that letter into the record because I was just astounded by these fake accusations from anonymous sources that were being entered into the record. These anonymous sources within the New Yorker article was really the fuel for the line of questioning for the majority of those Democrat senators. So I thought it was important for me, as a guy who was preceded by Pete Hegseth as a leader of Concerned Veterans for America, for me to go on the record and tell people that Concerned Veterans for America was a world-class organization that I was able to inherit. I kept his leadership team. I implemented the strategy that he developed. And Pete Hegseth was the reason why I was so successful in working with President Trump and members of Congress to pass two of the most historic reforms in VA history. And that was the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act of 2017, and then the Mission Act, which would bring choice in veteran healthcare. None of that would have been possible without Pete Hegseth. And I wanted to ensure that that perspective was on the record. And I put my name on those accusations or on that endorsement for Pete Hegseth because I believe so much in him.
Yeah. And Pete alluded to those accomplishments that you mentioned, in his hearing. Do we expect at this point, Mark, for Kash Patel at some point and RFK Jr. to actually be confirmed? And if so, when?
I do. I believe that all of Trump's nominees will be confirmed. Pete was acting as a heat shield. He was taking all of that heat for all these nominees, and that helped people like Tulsi and Kash and RFK Jr. I believe all of these nominees will be confirmed because President Trump has a mandate. His historic election victory, he delivered every single swing state. the American people sent a very strong message. They support him. And what we saw after the election was that with the Article 3 project, these nominees are very popular. We had that historic month in December. It aligned with public opinion polling, saying that not only is Trump's transition popular, but so are his nominees. So I do believe that there will be some tough hearings. There'll be some tough lines of questioning, but the Republicans in the Senate understand the mandate that President Trump was given, and they will deliver for President Trump.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think people are tired of seeing these old crotchety people who have been in Washington for their entire careers stand up and call themselves the experts, stand up and call themselves the grown-ups in the room. They're ready for a breath of fresh air. They're ready for people who have actually read the Constitution and respect the Constitution. You know, I think a lot of these senators, as I was listening to these confirmation hearings, have taken their to uphold the Constitution, having never read the document. That's how I feel about some of these senators who are speaking and just completely disrespecting the people that sat in front of them. I mean, it was just unbelievable to me. Would you tell us, okay, do you have any insight into when RFK and Kash may go into their hearing period?
I believe Cash's hearings start this week. And then RFK, I'm not sure when those are scheduled, but I do believe that they will see a swift confirmation. One point I wanted to make on what you're talking about with these senators not knowing the Constitution. During Pete's hearing, I was so saddened for people in Hawaii and Illinois
No kidding.
that they are represented by people like Senator Hirono and Tammy Duckworth. Their line of questioning was so out of line.
Horrible.
They were out of control. They were emotional. They were disrespectful. And I really commend Pete Hegseth. He kept his cool. He was respectful. But those questions were just so out of line.
Yeah.
And just an embarrassment to the state of Illinois and to the state of Hawaii. I believe they did a real disservice to their state. I believe they ultimately delivered Pete Hegseth a victory because the American people were able to see that they didn't have anything on Pete. They had this emotional response. They were beaten, and I was sitting there waiting for that shoe to drop, waiting for a curveball, and I could tell that it just wasn't coming.
Yeah.
That Pete Hegseth was open and honest about his background, about the problems that he's experienced in his marriages. He was very open and clear about that.
Yeah.
And really, he was able to talk about his record at Concerned Veterans for America. He was able to talk about his policy vision for the Department of Defense. And the Democrats were just left flailing. They looked unprofessional, and you could tell that they were beaten.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn movie store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
Yeah.
Very much so.
No one can tell me that Tammy Duckworth and Senator Hirono were legitimate candidates, right? You can't tell me that those women have an ounce of charisma or likability in them from that hearing. And I just felt like this is proof positive that we have to get our elections fixed, because the way that they are, I don't believe the people of Illinois and Hawaii actually voted for those women. Not in the slightest. I think that they're showing such disrespect and they're being so out of line with the will of the majority of the people, or even showing a willingness to kind of understand where Pete's coming from or understand maybe what the Secretary of Defense does as a basic idea. Just showed their ignorance was on absolutely full display. What is your sense, Mark, for when we're going to start hearing getting full Senate votes on some of these appointees?
We should start seeing it next week. If you look back at the Biden administration, for instance, a lot of these guys were confirmed on the day of the inauguration or shortly after. I believe that we have the momentum, that these Senate Republicans understand they have the wind at their back, and they want to get Trump's team confirmed and ready on day one.
Amazing. Now tell us again, how do we get to the Article 3 project, and who do you want us to support the most?
Well, the Article 3 project, you can reach us at article3project.org. You can take action there. The A3P Action Center has delivered some huge victories that we've already seen in changing the tone and the direction of these confirmations. Like I said earlier, many people in Washington said that Kash, Patel, and Pete Hegseth were dead on arrival. But A3P deployed our grassroots army all across the country, and we were able to change the trajectory of both those confirmations. And I'd say that one of the reasons why the Article 3 project is so important is that during President Trump's first term, he did not have an outside organization like the Article 3 project that could defend his nominees. We're going to do that, not just with Pete Hegseth and Kash, Patel, and Pam Bondi, but also with all of the judges and future confirmations. So you can go to the article3project.org and you can take action there.
Yeah. Mark, a point you made earlier, and this specifically applies to Pete Hegseth. You're exactly right. All of the mainstream media, every article that I read said that he's got absolutely no opportunity to get through the process. They're going to savage him and he's going to be done. Now it looks like he will get through. And I think this is a critical precedent that will be set for other nominees coming through. I think he really was the harbinger. I think he really was the test case going through, and he's handled himself so well. And I think it's going to make it so much easier for all the other ones coming through at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, as always, Mark Lucas, thank you for joining us. Always thank you for your insights. Before you go, I want to make it a point to tell our listeners here to make sure they join us here on the State of Freedom on Tuesday at 10 a.m. when we will have Matt Meck on to discuss the inauguration that will have then passed, and then what's going on with election security and election integrity in the United States of America. Mark Lucas, it's always a pleasure. God bless you, sir, and keep up all your great work.
Thank you for all your help. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.